the CJP protests or Sonam Wangchuk's hunger strike, all of it has led to the resignation of Dharmendra Pradhan. I want this to be the first ripple. And I know that there are a lot of people who feel this way, but I also know a lot of people who are so tired of this attempt that they are okay accepting this as the only thing they do for now. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Mehfooz's Musings. My name is Sabah. My pronouns are they, them. And I am joined by the very lovely Bhavya.
Hi everybody, I am Bhavya and I'm a therapist here at Mehfooz Therapy. For those who don't know me, I'm really looking forward to this conversation because even though we have loads of conversation, this is like a different setting.
We felt like the best way to really understand how Bhavya works as a therapist and how her and I have been able to build the way we want to interact with clients, what kind of depth we want to bring into our sessions. And it just felt natural to have that come into Mehfooz's musings. So I hope that everybody watching can also understand that for themselves, to see just how more intense topics are being handled at Mehfooz Therapy.
Hello, I'm Bhavya from the future. I'm just quickly stepping in to say that this episode we have had some open and intense conversation about grief, loss, and trauma. The content might be sensitive to some listeners. If you are watching this, every section has a black boundary. If need be, please feel free to skip those sections. Thank you so much for listening. Back to the OGs.
And I know that the topic is going to be difficult, as Bhavya wants to very eagerly show us.
I am so ready to address the elephant in the room.
This elephant is going to hopefully not pop up again, but if they do, I'm not sure of your elephant's pronouns. What would you like to address them with?
They, them.
They, them.
That's
Even I got a they, them vibe from them,
Yeah.
you know? Yeah. So I hope that they don't have to make a lot of entries into our conversations, but if they do, it will usually be maybe to call a tangent, or smoky hair will be that for everybody. To address the elephant in the room, or not so much so because it is in the title of our podcast today, we are going to be looking at some more variations, intensities, the ways in which grief shows up for people. Because in the way that I understood grief, at least as a kid, it was pretty black and white. It was a lot of, if you have to say goodbye to someone, it will happen in this with a lot of fanfare, with a lot of uh, conversations around it, or rituals around it, and that is it. That is where you will stop feeling the way you feel. And it was such a I feel like even though there might be some tweaks to this, a lot of people's initial experiences with grief have been that way, whether regardless of age. But the more Bhavya and I have spoken about it, we've realized that there is so much more to grief that needs to be spoken about, not in the how you process it necessarily, of course that too, but also in so many ways that we actually end up experiencing grief without realizing we're grieving.
As we were talking about this and you said childhood, it took me straight back to my childhood. And now when I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about and how I process grief, I think I didn't even know this one incident was actually grief and I was grieving. We were very young. We had gone to a trip to Chennai and we were at our cousin's house. We had a great time. I had a whole day of fun. And as soon as we came back, I had this green color Camlin box of crayons, the classic one that has like the monkey on the cover.
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah.
Yeah. As soon as I came back, I opened that box of crayon and all my crayons were broken. All of them, and all I could do was just sit there and cry because I didn't know what was I doing. Like even though people tried to explain to me and were like, it's just a box of crayon, we'll get new box of crayon tomorrow, it's not a big deal. But I just felt like this unexpected sadness that just took over. Like I didn't even know that was grief, but in hindsight it was, and I was processing it like ye mera tha, like that part of this is mine and it's gone. I think that was really hard to sit with.
I think that's so important also, because there's so much of grief or processing of mourning that we end up doing just because people don't let us have that space. And honestly, as a kid, maybe it is an emotion that's too large to hold. But honestly, isn't it the same at any age? I think there is no point in my life where I have experienced grief, whether it's considered small or large, that hasn't enveloped me in its feeling, in its heaviness. And I feel like it's so important to be able to tell the difference, I guess, as a parent, but also within yourself, to know which ones need to be held, respected, given the dignity of time and attention and care, and then let it pass. And those that just need to be like, I'll get another crayon box or whatever that version looks like, you know?
Yeah, it almost sounds like a boundary that you're trying to create with grief.
Yeah. Oh, that's a quote.
Uh, that just made me think of how uncertain grief is and how unexpectedly it comes. Even that makes it so. I keep joking about this, but this is one of my favorite metaphor that I think grief is like that unexpected guest who overstays their welcome. Don't you? So you have to handle your life as well as handle grief because it's right there sitting in your house.
I think that's also true for most forms of heaviness that are actually disguising emotions under it. I think if you think of anger, also stays for way longer than you want it to sometimes. Because the way to let it out is not by, let's say, an outburst or pushing it away or suppressing it. Sometimes it's actually to sit with it and let that primary emotion come through. Because I think this is a little bit of a detour, I suppose, but I think that when a person is brought down to tears or anger, they are never truly the actual feeling they're feeling, but because they can't deal with the actual feeling they're feeling, it shows up as anger or grief or sadness that is intense enough to let you lead you to tears. If you think of uninvited guests, I feel like there will never be a point where we are letting them in consensually or willingly. It will
True,
always demand its presence.
true. Almost just like grief does.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it almost doesn't give you the option of choosing to deal with it or ignore with
Yeah.
it. You just
Yeah.
have to.
Yeah. And I think some people listening today might think that we're minimizing what grief can be by comparing it to anger or comparing it to just crying. But why does grief have to be valid only when it is that large? Like when you think of the crayon example you spoke of earlier, I think to depending on the recipient of that story and how much of vulnerability you attach to what you're sharing, people will think of it as a passing moment or they will really sit with that with you. So, who are we to say whose grief is large enough to hold or not, right?
True.
Which means that in some spaces, grief will be on the same plane as an anger outburst, or having to let heave a sob out, because it's going to feel like that, and sometimes just crying it out might help, but it is equally valid. What
True,
is
true.
something, just going into a tangent, I suppose, again, but what is something that you feel like you have grieved more often than you'd like to admit?
My pet passing. Because even though as soon as I say pet passing, everyone's like, yeah, obviously you did that. But now when I think of it, I didn't even know that I was doing it. So I think my pet passing, and that's what. So it's you lead it with emotion and not less with your brain, because it can't always be like, oh, I'm angry because of this reason, oh, I'm sad because I'm this reason. Sometimes it's not even seeing dogs around me, it's just sometimes monsoon because my pet had a raincoat, and the fact that I can see other dogs just walking around with their raincoat on.
And as a thing about associations, right? We end up associating so many things. There are, if let's say this is something that I feel grief about, there are going to be 50 different branches I'm going to have. Or even if you think of each hair of this fake, obviously, for each of these could be a link that it's creating. And each of these could be ways that you might really feel like, okay, I have made my peace with it, there is nothing left to grieve. But these links might just show up out of nowhere and want to take you back. But I, at least from my personal experience, I feel like other than, of course, like say a very direct relation like you having with monsoon and the raincoat, and it's like such a close link that it will always feel a little
Yeah.
like you have to sit with that almost. But I think my way of understanding if I have been able to work around my grief better is by knowing that every time this shows up, these links show up, how am I feeling about it? Is any part of me going to the fondness I hold for that memory, or is it only that pain or heaviness, or oh, I don't want to think about it? And regardless, there is no wrong way to go about grief, but it just helps me chart a path of, oh, I'm able to think of this time, or oh, I'm not pushing it away, or oh, I felt like talking about it with a friend, or let's say if it's related to a weather, maybe I am able to enjoy it, or I might realize I felt that way about the weather only after, like, oh, I usually feel this way about monsoons, but this time I was just able to be happy about getting wet in the rain or something like that, you know. And that is exactly why I don't think there can ever be a manual on how to process grief, even if there are many that exist, I'm sure. And even if you look at stages of grief, regardless of what path you look at, there is actually no linearity to processing grief, right?
True. And everyone, when we say that everyone deals with grief differently, the biggest fact is that as individual, we grieve different grief differently.
Mm.
Me losing my pet, me losing those crayon had completely different reactions. Totally
Yeah.
different reaction. And that's proof enough that grief is so delicate and unique, even when it's the same person processing it. I was gonna say it's also interesting that, as you said, that talking to a friend is like maybe a sign. For
Mm.
me, I think that was also a struggle deciding between closeness and distance from other people. And it's not just about bereavement and someone passing away that people play a role, but it's also a loss of identity or a relationship or something in some meaning making has shifted in me. So I think that is also very important for me to figure out. Do I want people around me when I'm grieving? Do I not want people around me when I'm grieving? What would I like to have while I'm grieving?
And even along with that, I think even if I have people around me when I'm grieving, do I want them to be a part of the grief or a part of the reminder that I have a life beyond that feeling?
Hmm.
I think is also very important. So when I'm also thinking of I would like to talk to a friend about it, it's not necessarily of, oh, I felt this way. It might be about, oh, I went out and I did all of these things, and this might be a fleeting mention, but it might be about finding companionship or closeness or feeling community in that moment that will pull me out of that feeling, you know.
It is unique. It is delicate and unique.
Yeah. I was also thinking that it is also unique in the sense of, even if someone had brought you a different crayon box, or let's say a sibling of yours adopts a pet later and you have a good bond with that pet, it's still not going to be the same. It's unique in the sense of, with that object or being, the relationship you have cannot be replicated. You can form that form of love again, maybe, or that form of, closeness, warmth, safety, comfort, everything, but you cannot mimic that relationship. It's so unique to whatever you had it with, which is why grief is so difficult. Because with most other feelings, like with happiness, I'm not feeling that happiness I felt on that trip again. Let's go on another, or let's look through the slideshow of that trip. There is something, right? But when it comes to grief, it's so, you just have to let it be felt. You just have to let it be a part of you, and eventually there will be more added to you. But that stays, pain, or whether it is the ache, I guess is the better word, that stays, has to stay. It has to be a part of you. Otherwise, there is no. I can't imagine a life where I never experience grief or pain or loss. So, lack is very different from loss. If I had never had it, if it's a lack, I could go on my whole life without realizing what I'm missing out on, which is okay. But if I've had it and I've lost it, I think is such an important feeling to hold on to. It's like knowing, those people who say, oh, if I could wish for anything, I'd wish for immortality. But I sometimes think about that. If I really had all the time in the world to do all the things I would want to do, I would not do most of the things, or I would not find the joy. What's the spark about? Like, if there is no quote unquote deadline to life as a whole, what am I trying to finish up things before? You know? Like, the only thing would be that, oh, it's perishable. Or, oh, in 20 years we might not have these things, sure. But it's still not going to be the same. That little curiosity, the spark, the passion, it comes from the finality, which we are not thinking of when we are experiencing these things, but it adds life to the feeling.
It does. I think it adds on to the love also.
Yeah, very true.
The positive, intense feeling that grief takes away. And I,
Yeah.
as you were speaking, I could feel it physically. Like I could feel it in my chest. I could feel it. Yeah, grief is still there. Like even if I can't pinpoint immediately what it is about, I can still feel it.
There's a lot of media also, if you think about it, a lot of movies, books, shows, what name you, that has very indirectly also spoken of grief. Like, it's not always, of course, there are a lot of movies that are very directly talking about grief, like Man Called Ove. Oh no, what's
Yeah.
that book? That's the book. What's the movie called? Man Named Otto.
Man named Roto, yes.
Yes. And if you look at those, of course, you're going to sit and you're going to weep for the character, for the pain he
Yeah.
feels, for whatever
Yeah.
else. I mean, of course, there's n number of movies like that. There's even, if you think about it, Bagban. I don't know if you were raised by that movie.
My parents were.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. Yeah.
So even in that, like, what I'm trying to say is there's a lot of movies that you're going to need a box of tissues to sit and get through. But there are some that very surprisingly take you through that journey of grief, almost in a passive way, where you don't have to experience it yourself across time, but you get to see someone go through it and go past it. And it kind of gives you that sort of satisfaction that you've been looking for. Do you know what I mean? Like an itch that has been cleared out.
Yeah, like almost like it hasn't happened to me, but I see what you mean and I can relate to it, even though it's in a light hearted, comical way. I can still feel it.
But there are also some movies that are quite impactful, in a way where it just, like I was saying, it carries you through the grief, right? What kind of movies do you think made that impact on you?
I think immediately one on top of my head would be Intern, because it showed grief in so many different way and so many different characters dealing with it. Like Anne Hathaway's character so beautifully defined that, oh, I need to recognize that there's something going on with my relationship and I need to grieve it while living it.
Actually, with Anne Hathaway's character, she experiences grief in multitudes. I'm going to go on a rant maybe. But she's dealing with grief with the relationship she has with her daughter, that in very pivotal moments of her child's toddler phase, where the child is growing every hour. There are different things they're learning of their environment, holding on to it, different stims they might have, different ways they might be functioning through the day. And it feels like you've just missed out on a chunk of it, just because the second area of grief, which becomes, I have to focus on becoming a CEO of a up and coming retail company. And because it's up and coming and because there is so much to do, I mean, even without the husband and the child, it would be something that becomes your primary focus. So to do that or give it space brings in so much guilt, because of course a mother has to be a mom and a wife and everything else, and this should not be impacting that. And even if you take that away, let's say this is an American movie, so maybe they're not thinking of it as deeply as Indians would. You're still looking at her having to have these conflicting moments of, I want to sit with my daughter for her breakfast, or I want to go with her, drop her off to school, but suddenly there's this call coming in about the job, there's a call coming in about an order that wasn't shipped properly. Like, I remember very distinctly this scene in the beginning where she's talking to her daughter, or she just comes down and she's quickly doing her thing talking to her daughter, and then she sees that a box is delivered which she was trying to test and see, if the delivery looks exactly like it would, how she wants it to. And then she's opening it, she's taking pictures, then immediately she's going to the warehouse and talking to them. But the flow in which she does that, there have always been moments in the movie where she's missing out on time with her family, or missing out time with herself. That even when they go on holiday, I mean,
To
to
yeah, to see the CEO of a
right, who a potential different, yeah, yeah. So there is so much grief with that, with having to lose that role, what it means to her, what is she doing it for, is it really for herself, or for a husband who's infidel, or for a daughter who she's missing out pivotal time with, or for herself who didn't think this would become as big as it did. But yeah, like I said, there was a lot I had to say.
yeah, no, it really sounds like a trade off of, oh, I
Yeah,
need to grieve so many things, I don't know where to start. And
yeah,
almost it immediately, she also logically was like, why is my partner cheating on me? And that was the first grief that hit her, that, oh, maybe everything is interconnected and everything got to do something. And it's a very beautiful grieving process, because somewhere down the line she is self-blaming, but at the same time there is a genuine trade-off of both being important hopes and expectations from
yeah.
life.
But there's also, and not to be the devil's advocate here, but isn't there also so much to look at? She had to sit with the grief that there is no winning. There is no stick she can draw where she gets the job and the partner and the kid and everything else and her sanity, if I may say so, in all in one. That there is always something she loses in this trade off that she didn't sign up for. Of course, she signed up for them individually, but not as a bunch that she has to, kind of like a pie chart of equal degrees of attention, care, everything else that she had to do. So there's going to be grief regardless. And maybe that's why she could, or we saw the character thrive in the end. Because sometimes when you know that all you can have about the situation is the autonomy of how you react to it, how you sit with it, sometimes you end up having a more real process of grief. And when I say real, I don't mean that it's on a degree of real or not, but on a degree of how true or how honest am I being with myself about this grief. Smokey, okay. Smokey wants to say hi, everybody. Hi. So Smokey is a very empathetic cat, and whenever I'm thinking about very serious thoughts, he'll show up and he'll try to make his presence known. So if you ever see him on my podcast, this is why he is just trying to check in on me. And now that I have laughed, I think he's okay now. He's gonna make his way.
I
But
was
yeah,
gonna say, just like you said that there is no winning, I think it took me back to our conversation of like how there is no manual for grief, there is no manual for life either. You can never predict that, oh, leaving the job might result in this, or leaving the kid and the family might result in this. If only there was a manual for life.
I always think with how many people wish for it, and sometimes my clients would also, jokingly comment on, I wish there was a manual to get through this exact same situation. I honestly don't know if I would have gone for said manual. And maybe it's my neurodivergence. I'm not sure. But I feel like if I knew, or if someone was letting me understand exactly what I need to do to get through something, I don't think I would have enjoyed any part of it. There's this movie or a show whose trailer I had seen, and the only premise of it was someone came up with an invention where you could see 1 second into the future, just a second.
Okay.
But in seeing themselves say exactly what they were about to say and then saying it, is that same room they're all in, they're all watching themselves a second forward. Everybody suddenly realized that it feels like they have no free will. And to sit with that was so disorienting for them that each of them had very varied responses. But I feel like it would just open up so much room for grief for me, that all of these possibilities that I think I can have, all of this potential or portrayal of my potential is lost because everything looks like it has been planned out. There is a manual that's being followed to some degree, you know?
But that manual thing, it doesn't stop us from thinking that other people did get a manual.
Do you mean in terms of privilege?
Maybe, but also maybe in terms of that, am I doing grief right?
Can you give me an example? What do you think looks like when someone has a manual?
Interesting question. Because since grief is so different for everyone else, that when I am grieving messily, I wouldn't say ugly because I'm against. I would rather say messy because the whole process is so messy. That when I see other people, it just feels like they know what they're doing, which I am aware of that that's not true. But it's like that elephant in the room that everyone can see the elephant, but no one seems to be talking about it.
Some people just don't experience grief that way.
Like by knowing that elephant is there.
So when we look at people who are able to get through life, even with hardships, and they seem like they've got it together, like there doesn't seem to be anything that's like, I see what all of this pain has done to them. It almost seems like they've just floated by. What do you think that's about?
I think it's about us not knowing how their process was.
Yeah. Which means that that was their manual, which they must have created in their own time and space. So instead of looking at it as a manual that they had a better access to, maybe they just let themselves curate one for themselves.
Yeah, so there is a manual, but you have to create it all on your own,
Ding, ding, ding.
personalized to you.
Because that's exactly why I was saying earlier that the stages of grief or the process of grief should not be quantified into, okay, you feel this, then you feel this, then you feel that. And then sometimes you'll feel this again and that again. It should be, my grief feels this way to me right now. And the next thing I'm feeling like I'm inching towards, let me do a check of, is this feeling like it's being true to myself? Am I doing this because someone expects this of me or I should be doing it? If not, it feels like it's truly how I would process it and it's not harming me or someone else, whether it's physically, emotionally, spiritually, then I think it's the next way forward. And then so on and so forth until you reach a point where you're looking back at grief, like I said in the beginning.
That makes sense. That makes so much sense. But then it makes me think that is there a timeline for creating this manual? Because since grief came unexpectedly,
Mm.
I have to.
It also goes away unexpectedly if you think about it.
Yeah, yeah. Whenever it's ready to. But does it truly leave?
Good question, also. Maybe it's not supposed to, at least with the type of grief I am going back to in my own life. Maybe some of it needs to stay because it gives us. This might be a thought that might be a little too intense for some people. But when I think of grief, it's always in isolation, right? Even if 10 people have felt the same exact grief or about the same exact person or thing or possibility that couldn't happen, how you feel it is still so isolated that I think at times the only way I have felt less isolated is by knowing that how has grief felt for me before and over time how it started feeling for me. And that gives me more hope than others telling me that it's going to be okay or this too shall pass or whatever else they might come up with. Because nobody will get that isolation, even the need for it, other than versions of yourself.
Almost like that relationship and the meaning that you make of that loss. Because no one will understand the bond or the vibe that you guys had or the vibe that you had with that I had with my crayon because they were mine that I
Yeah.
keep coming back to. But I think the relationship people might not be able to understand it.
Exactly. Sometimes it's possible we might not understand it either. Like you have an example where you still do understand why you felt about that way about the crayons. But if I'm thinking of, say, how I have felt about paper stars, I make these stars, these paper stars, and this is a thing I do daily. And it's just being collected in boxes, large Amazon boxes, if I may be honest with everybody here. But while I was moving houses, a series of unfortunate events, and I lost two big boxes full of stars that I spent, I don't know how much time over. Because while I was making them, it was not about collecting them or gathering them or having them in one place or even using them, but knowing that I had such an ease of access to, if I ever wanted to, I could. And it being taken away, it was such a odd or new feeling of grief, new version of grief for me. Because it's not something that I've lost, because I was not really holding on to it like it's mine. It was just something that I enjoyed doing in the process, and then it would just be in the box. I was not even looking at the box. I still don't look at the other boxes that I left behind. There is no moment I'm sitting with any star and I'm like, I lost so many of those. I don't think about it. But I know that if I ever am talking about my excitement of making these stars, I know a small part of me is thinking about those lost stars. But I'm not grieving it in the present, right? So sometimes when you have things like my stars or your crayons, we're going to see grief in such different paradigms, but equally impactful in the way they existed. So I think if we don't have those in our moments of isolation or in our moments of whenever we might feel this way similarly next, whether it's a remnant of what it was or something new altogether, no version of us will fully understand ourselves like we did. However, there are some times, like I was saying with my stars, where I don't think it is going to be impactful in the sense of next time I experience grief, I'll think of the stars, because the magnitude of its impact was different. But it doesn't mean that when I think of things that I think back to fondly or think back to in terms of, oh, I wish I could have changed that, I won't think of the stars, you know? So, depending on the degree at which it affects us, I feel like how much we will need of it in the next moment of or the next dip of grief is different, but it doesn't make it any less significant. Do you get what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, yeah, that's so true. Like, even when I think of it, that moving from school to college, college to university, there was so much that was happening and so much change was happening. Like, I remember that on 12th, like my last day of school, I was upset. When I was leaving my college life, I was upset that I had to leave the PG. And when I was leaving my master's university, I was upset that I had to leave it. And it only when we feel that this is such a constant, but that constant ka intensity definitely changes.
And the opposite also is true sometimes. If you think about it, there are times when, like, I felt this way when I passed out of 10th or 12th. I was just thinking about the next thing. Maybe it is also again my neurodivergence, which was just like, okay, there's a rule book in my head. I have to just follow it, blah, 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 and then get to whatever point I need to next. But I now grieve the time I had and lost in 10th and 12th with the kind of friends I had, with the kind of community I was building, how different things were back then. So sometimes grief in that moment is not as heavy as it is in its impact or its ripples through time. Because we all look back at our school years fondly or our childhood playtime. Like when I was a kid, there were no phones. I mean, there were phones, but they were not really mainstream as they are today. And if you had to meet a friend, you would just go to the spot and wait for that time to arrive. And not everybody lived in your building, so you couldn't just call out for them. Or the place I lived in, you couldn't just yell across buildings because there people were just a little more, strict about things. So we would just go wait at this one gate, and there were two gates. So the gate which has more, paint scraped off, that's the gate we would meet at every day at 6. And if somebody can't come, you just have to wait and find out. And the novelty of it is so, it's really lost on us. Like the other day, I was watching Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, the first original of the live-action Spider-Man, and there's a scene where he saves the people in the train, and they all kind of, bring him into the train to see if he's okay. And I was just watching it and I realized in today's time, if people were to have that happen with him unmasked, there would be 20 cameras on his face trying to, and there were no cameras. He was not scared of that. It wasn't even a thought for him because this was a movie before the time of phones. So there is grief, there is mourning, there is loss to experience in so many different facets of life that way.
Yeah. Almost like nostalgia holds so much grief in
Exactly.
an exciting way, but also in like a really heartfelt and deep way.
Exactly, yeah. But going back to thinking of what movies or shows or books have placed that impact on us, What's a movie you think of when you think of it this way?
I saw something very recently. It's called The Terminal.
With Tom Hanks.
Yeah.
The one where he, I remember that right when he reaches LAX, I think it is, or New York, I think. He reaches the new airport. He, uh, he gets to know that his country is no longer a free sovereign country and it has been taken over by another. So he's at this airport trying to pass through the passport and visa checkpoint, and they just won't be, the machine just won't accept it because his country just doesn't exist anymore. And so they know that the moment he's going to leave this airport, he's going to be off nowhere. He cannot go back, he cannot stay there. So this movie essentially takes us through the journey of someone who does not speak the language of the people there, who has to find a way to continue existing with meals, with sleep, with work, with so many other things that he tries to do inside the terminal. It's actually loosely based on a real story. I don't know if you know about that. But this guy, yeah, it's a very beautiful story. I'm going to talk about it some other day, not make this about that. But what made you think of Grief and the Terminal?
I think the universality of it, as you said, that he did not speak the language, and yet his grief was so clearly translated through the screen. Like we knew and we were mourning along with him, and we were worried that, oh, what is he gonna do now? And we felt it with him, but at the same time, he didn't express it in any language that I would know. And that just makes me think that how grief is its own language.
But even if you think about it, we, the viewers, know the language the others are speaking, and we know the hardship he's going through. So it's a very awkward, not awkward, what's the word? It's a very um, thin line that we draw between that voyeuristic itch almost that we have of seeing this through while getting why others are saying what they're saying, why they're frustrated, why they're cornering him, what they're asking him, and knowing how it's impacting him because he just does not get it. And I don't know if it's because I come from a marginalized community or if it's something else, but I think it impacts a person with societal disadvantages in very similar ways if you compare the terminal to the social ecosystem you're in, you know. And if it's not language, it's culture. If it's not culture, it's gender. If it's not gender, it's caste. It's so many other things that can be brought in. It's queerness, it's anything that people would see as a lesser than in a society where just the norm is accepted. Nobody tried to find out. I think they looked for a translator for the first day or so, but they didn't after that. There was no attempt made to understand him, understand why, and understand that in his place, people would have done worse. People would have not been able to cope with not having a place to go back to, having a family, but no way to get back to them. I mean, can you even imagine experiencing something so harrowing?
It just makes me feel proud of him in some way.
Yeah.
I don't think if
It
proud
feels
is
a very
the word.
personal victory in that movie.
Yeah, it feels personal. Like whatever he was there to achieve and however wherever the story led him, it was just really beautiful to see. And it's not a I want to give it credit as you need to be resilient to beat the grief. And I don't think that's the point of the movie, but more about the experience of how one goes through the journey of grief.
Yeah. And I think it's also about how, even when you're watching him live all of this and you're seeing him figure things out or make mistakes, no part of us is still feeling like that is a manual for if this ever happens to me, you know? Because what he goes through, the hardships, the grief, the mourning, the looking at news and trying to find out if anything will be said about his country, and just waiting for all of it to go by because at the airport he has no way to control what he views. He's just trying to find ways to make do, to know that he can't even tell his family that he's okay. He can't contact anybody. He can't even speak to anybody in that space. And yeah, I don't think that just comes to show that I don't think there can be a manual or should be a manual for places or for spaces. That is something that everybody will feel like they have gone through in their own ways, but still feel isolated in.
Yeah, it is a universal experience, and I think that's the irony of it, that it's so universal and everyone goes through it, but while they are going through it, they feel so alone and lonely, like no one's understanding me.
I feel like if you think about it, and at the time of recording, we are right after the CJB protests or Sonam Wangchuk's hunger strike. All of it has led to the resignation of Dharmendra Pradhan. I feel like it's now more than ever that we are understanding grief through so many lenses. You know, a lot of generations have never experienced, regardless of generation, a lot of Indians haven't experienced something this momentous or feeling like they don't have power or autonomy in their own space. For me, I, without going into too much detail, have grown up around a lot of religion and caste-based violence of the environment I lived in and grew up around. So I have seen a lot of riots, but with how much I have experienced growing up, I feel like it wasn't that new or that different from how standing up for yourself, standing up for people in a similar social disadvantage means to you. So it I think people who lived the same or similar life that I did had two types of reactions. There were some that were like, oh my god, finally there's hope. And there were some who were like, this is not gonna work. We've tried this 100 times. I myself oscillated between the two so much that in all of this there was just so much grief that I was consistently feeling, not just for the people who are going through what I either actively or passively went through as a child, and feeling that grief for I never actually processed just how much I dealt with as a child because it was normalized. Because even in that, I did not get that isolation to process my grief. You know, so when people talk about, oh, you went to the protest but it was so far away, I went to the one in my state, and it was the other part of my state essentially. I was asked by a lot of people, oh, you went all the way, but it wasn't even at Jantar Mantar, it's not like you were going to the original one. But I knew that I had to, if I did not go for the Sabha who had to experience so much, and I did not go through for the kids or the youth who is experiencing that today, then I all of that I have gone through is in vain. So my processing of grief started when others showed me that there is room for hope, there is room for change, and my work on my grief started in showing my solidarity with them. You know.
Almost the strength in collectively grieving together.
Yeah.
Even though it's an individual experience, it just makes you feel less alone and gives you a lot more confidence and strength.
I think that's also why so many people ended up loving the humor, the dance, the joy in the protest. Because it should not be something that brings you down. It's finally the thing that should not bring you down. So I think in that I got a lot more room to process my grief, my pain, what I belittled as I'm just a child who doesn't know that this is normal.
Sounds like such a victory, even in a small way, but it sounds like a good start. Good
Yeah.
start.
I definitely don't think this should be the end, and I could get sued for this. But I really think that I cannot see a future where all we look back to at this point was that, oh, Sonam Wangchuk and others who protested, like from ISA and other spaces, they protested for the resignation, and the resignation was ours, and that's it. I want this to be the first ripple. And I know that there are a lot of people who feel this way, but I also know a lot of people who are so tired of this attempt that they are okay accepting this as the only thing they do for now. I think the difference also might lie in the sense of privilege people have had, because the ones who are tired are also often the ones who haven't experienced this in any other way before, or they've experienced this in terms of workplace trauma or very specific spaces, but not community or society as a whole. So for those who felt this all their life and are seeing the first move towards something more, for them this is like, okay, what next? What more? Let's do more. And it's, yeah, I don't actually know. Maybe by the time we are posting this, something is happening. But I think the primary antidote to being able to process grief and work out of it is hope. Is to let yourself hope.
Almost like give you permission to grieve.
Yeah.
It's going to be messy. It's going to have its own curves and turns, and it might surprise you in unsurprising ways.
So, in a very odd turn of events, we have reached the end of our podcast. I don't think there is any segue that can lead us to ending this podcast. So, I think what we'll do is we'll stop this here. I will say a few things. One of them, very important thing, is if you would like to participate in this podcast, yes, you listening, if you want to participate in this podcast in any capacity, all you have to do is send us an email at mahfoozmusings@gmail.com. We repeat,
Mahfoozmusing@gmail.com.
and we are looking forward to hearing your questions, your thoughts, your opinions, your feedback, whatever it is. And if you consent to it, we will play your voice note or text, read out your message on our podcast and answer it live. And it's going to be fun because it's going to be interactive. And I hope that more people can send in their suggestions, thoughts, opinions, whatever it may be. If you feel like you're brave enough to add your comments, feedbacks, whatever else to us right out in the open, you can leave a comment down below. And make sure that you're liking the video so we know how you feel about it. Make sure you're subscribing so you don't miss out on our next upload. And we are also going to be soon starting with videos that are long form content. That will be just one of our therapists is sitting and talking to you, trying to explain a concept in a simple way, maybe. So if you have any suggestions or any thoughts of what you would like to hear, let us know in the comments. And these are our socials. We are Mahfooz Therapy everywhere you can think of. And we will see you very soon. Anything you want to say, Bhavya?
I would like to say bye to the elephant. Bye bye.
Bye. Thank you for joining us, Mixed Elephant. On that lovely note, thank you everybody. Thank you, Bhavya. And thank you, Sabha. I will see you all soon.